Listen, old hag, in the house, you're choking us. The garage is the only way this family can breathe. My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the quiet morning like a knife. She slammed her coffee cup down hard. Think of it as a test. If you make it through the winter out there, we might change our minds. I sat there, my hands still in my lap, feeling every bit of my 75 years. I was quiet, not daring to make a sound. I used to be a court secretary for 47 years. I was organized, respected, known for my neat files and my strong voice. But after a small stroke 3 months ago, I couldn't walk the lines anymore. I thought I was going home to comfort, not to a cold garage filled with dusty boxes and old garden tools. I live here now in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with my son and his wife. This is their home, their world. After the stroke, the doctor said I shouldn't be alone. My son, Michael, said I should move in for a short time so they could help me. I said yes because I thought they meant real help with groceries, with doctor's visits, with keeping track of my medicines. I never thought I would become a burden to be hidden away. The morning after my first night in the garage, I woke up to a floor covered in sawdust. My bed was a simple folding cot with a thin, old blanket. There was no heat, no window for light. A single flashlight hung from the wall. I lay there, looking at the cracks in the ceiling and the peeling paint. I found myself missing courtrooms. I missed the sound of many voices and the steady click of typing. I missed the clean smell of paper. Later that morning, my son poked his head in. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, half caring, half not wanting to be there. He wore messy sweatpants, just like his wife. I nodded. My voice felt rough in my throat. He sighed. "We'll get you a small heater soon. Just need to check the power." Okay, I managed. When he shut the door, I heard his wife whisper, "If she freezes to death, we don't have to deal with her legal papers or house transfers." And then her voice grew louder. "It's better than dealing with this every single day. You know?" I stayed still, pretending to sleep. My hands felt weak, but my mind was as sharp as ever. I remembered filing court papers, reading pages of sworn statements, managing court schedules for 80-year-old judges whose hands shook. I had never felt so useless. I got up and found my robe hanging over the garage door. I wrapped it around myself and sat on the cot, hands in my lap, breathing in the smell of cardboard boxes and rusty tools. I wondered what they used me for before. Had I become a reminder of getting old and needing help? The second night was colder. I pulled the thin blanket over me and hoped I wouldn't wake up shivering in the middle of the night. I thought of my husband, of his laugh, the way he held me when I cried about the stroke. I thought of our small apartment, now sold, of the court hallways I would never walk again, of every dusty paper I signed in clearer days. Morning came again, with a low chirping sound that woke me up suddenly. My phone. I had hidden it in the glove compartment of their car before moving in. I answered. It was my niece calling from Baltimore. "Aunt Eleanor, how are you feeling?" she asked, her voice kind. "I'm managing," I said softly. Her voice trembled. "You sound cold, physically cold. Are you safe?" I swallowed. "I'm safe," she said. "Mom told me you were staying in the den." I paused. I sleep in the garage." There was a long silence then. "Mom, that is illegal. You should not." She hung up. I closed my eyes. Legal. I had been so worried about being polite, about not causing trouble, about showing thanks. But thanks sits in a warm chair by a fire. This was thanks felt through shivers. That afternoon, I kept busy. I found the small toy chest we had brought with my granddaughter's childhood blankets. I put one of them on my cot. I folded the blanket neatly and placed it next to me. I turned the flashlight, so it shined on the cot instead of the shelves, making a small feeling of safety. But the truth was, I was not wanted, not safe, not at home. That evening, I heard them through the wall vent. Michael's sound of anger burned through me. "I can't believe she's still alive," he said. "Are you hearing that?" His wife replied softly, but clearly, "Better alive than with legal power to sign, taxes to file, emotional breakdowns of our own." "You aren't ready," he said. "We have to wait until the lawyer says she's not thinking clearly." I press my ear to the vent. Clearly thinking? That word. They were getting papers ready while I lay freezing because they had the money and they wanted control. I curled onto my side, eyes closed, tears forming in the shadows. This wasn't kindness. It was a judgment. This wasn't family. It was a cold plan. I prayed that night not to freeze. I prayed my mind would stay clear. I prayed that somewhere someone would see what was happening. I remembered my days at the courthouse, the sound of the judge's hammer, the rustle of legal papers, the power in my hands. I still had words. I still had a clear mind. I still had enough to act. Those 2 nights in the garage were a test of strength. They wanted silence. They thought I would disappear behind dust and shadows. But I learned something very important. Surviving doesn't mean you have to stay quiet, and enduring doesn't have to mean giving up. And that understanding was the spark that carried me into the next morning when, on the 3rd dawn, I would walk into their dining room, clear-eyed and calm, and hand them the eviction notice signed by my lawyer and approved by a retired judge who knew me well, a judge who remembered what fairness felt like, even when it was given from a cold garage. The first night in the garage was colder than I thought. I had put on every sweater I could find, pulled the rough blanket tight around my shoulders, and tried to ignore the cold air coming from under the door that connected the garage to the main house. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the far-off hum of cars, seemed much louder through the walls. My bones ached from the cot's metal bar pressing against my back. I curled up like a hurt animal, waiting for the night to pass. But it wasn't just the cold that kept me awake. It was the memories. I thought about Michael as a boy, his wide eyes when I packed his lunch, the way he used to hug me after every spelling bee, even the ones he didn't win. I remembered working extra shifts, typing court papers until my fingers were numb so he could have new shoes and piano lessons. I remembered saving money for his college tuition when his father's retirement money ran out, giving up my own vacation, so he could study money in a university far away. And now here I was shivering in his garage like a forgotten piece of furniture. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the cot, my knees stiff, my breath visible in the air. I poured a little water from the thermos they'd left me. It was lukewarm, barely enough to ease the tightness in my chest. There was a bowl of rice porridge on a tray beside it. Cold, no spoon. I used a plastic fork from my purse. I waited until I heard them leave before I slipped out the side door and walked slowly to the mailbox just to move my legs. My joints hurt, but I kept my back straight. That afternoon, through the small cracked window near the top of the garage door, I watched them return with friends. They carried bags full of wine, chips, party food. Laughter filled the driveway. It was a birthday. I had forgotten. Michael's wife turned 42 that day. From the garage, I watched them gather in the living room. Through a gap in the curtain, I saw them open champagne. Someone brought out a cake. A banner was taped across the wall. "Happy birthday, Rachel." It read in gold. No one came to the garage to check on me. No one brought me a slice. That night, I coughed until my throat burned. I tried not to make noise. I wiped the blood with my sleeve, then tucked the cloth under the mattress so no one would see. I did not knock. They had made it clear. I was not to interrupt their family life. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the back porch. The walls in the garage were thin, near the water heater. I pressed my ear to the spot and held my breath. It was Michael talking to someone on the phone. His voice was low, but sharp. "She's still here." "Yeah, I thought she'd last 2 days tops." A pause. "No, we can't move forward until we have proof she's not thinking clearly. The lawyer said once we get 2 more medical checks, we can ask for full control over her." Another pause. "She won't sign anything. She just sits in there like a ghost." And then a small laugh. "I swear Mom's tougher than she looks, but if she makes even one mistake, forgetting things, confusion, we can file." I stepped back from the wall. My stomach turned. Control over me. That's what this was about. They weren't just mean. They were planning. They wanted control of my medical choices, my money, my remaining things. And they were waiting for me to break, to cry, to forget, to stumble. They had mistaken my quietness for giving up. It was a mistake. I sat back on the cot, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from anger. I wrapped the blanket tighter and closed my eyes. But I wasn't resting. I was remembering. By the time morning came, I had a plan. Not revenge, not anger, just truth. Truth given with the same care I once used to prepare court papers, with the same voice I once used to announce, "All rise," in a courtroom. They thought 2 nights in the cold would make me weak, but they had no idea who made that roof they were drinking under. And I was about to remind them quietly, completely, and without raising my voice. My granddaughter, Lily, gave me the watch 2 Christmases ago. "You have to stay sharp, Grandma," she said, putting the sleek little thing on my wrist with pride. "It tracks your steps, checks your heart rate, and if anything ever happens, it records." At the time, I smiled and let her have her way. She was always so thoughtful, so practical, so much like her mother, my daughter, who died too young. I wore the watch every day, mostly to please her. I never thought it would become my shield. But that night, after listening to Michael's whispered plans for controlling me, I tapped the watch face 3 times. The screen blinked once, red. That meant it was listening, and I began recording. The next morning, I did not speak a word during breakfast. Not that anyone offered me anything, but I passed Michael in the hallway while he refilled his coffee, and I smiled at him like nothing had happened. I went back to the garage, closed the door. Later that afternoon, they had guests again. This time, Michael's college friend Sam was visiting, a loud, noisy man with opinions as big as his belt buckle. I heard their conversation from the kitchen, just a few feet beyond the garage wall. "She's still out there?" Sam asked, laughing. Michael's voice was low. "Yeah, in the garage." "No way. That's cold-hearted. Man." "She'll be fine," Michael said, then added with a chuckle, "That house has been ours since we got married, just missing the paperwork." Rachel joined in. "The garage is the only place she can die and not cause trouble for anyone." They all laughed. I pressed the watch again. Another blink. Another file saved. I recorded it all. Their laughter, their words, the sheer meanness hidden as casual talk. That night, I reviewed the files. The sound was clear, sharp, every word easy to hear. The kind of proof I used to help file official reports. The kind of spoken evidence judges leaned forward to hear. I found the garage's hidden Wi-Fi network. Michael thought he'd cut off access, but he didn't know about the second line I had put in during the renovation I paid for 5 years ago. I used my old tablet, still tucked inside my suitcase, to send the audio and video clips. And then I sent them to my lawyer, to someone I had not spoken to in nearly 10 years. Her name was Frances. We had worked side by side for over 20 years. She was once the main clerk in the family court, known for remembering everything and having no patience for bad behavior. When I stopped working, she brought me a yellow rose and said, "If you ever need me, truly need me, You call. That night, I called. Frances answered on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd finally stop being polite, she said. I have something. I replied. I figured you would. I emailed her the files. 5 minutes later, she texted, Got them. You're not alone. Wait tight. This is going to move fast. And just like that, the temperature in the garage felt a little less cold because Fairness had heard me, and it was getting ready. I waited until the house was asleep. It was past midnight when I slipped my coat over my shoulders and sat near the garage's side door, the one that gave me just enough signal to make a call. I held the phone close to my chest as it rang. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the importance of what I was about to do. When he answered, his voice was exactly as I remembered it, calm, steady, low. Eleanor, he said. Yes, Judge Benton. I replied. I hope I didn't wake you. I've been waiting for this call for years. He meant it. I could hear it in the sigh that followed. Tell me what happened. I told him everything, quietly, slowly, without being too dramatic. Just the facts, like I had done 1,000 times in his courtroom. The garage, the freezing nights, the talks I had recorded, the plan for controlling me, their voices calling me a burden, their laughter about my death. I have the files. I said, audio, video, dates, faces. You will hear everything. There was a pause. Then he said, I told you once if you were ever betrayed, you call me first. I remember I whispered, and I told you why. He continued, because no one remembers the smartest woman in the room until it's her word against theirs. And when it is, they lose. My throat felt tight. Can you help me? I'm a retired judge. He said, but I still have friends, good ones, and I know which doors to knock on. That night, we built a plan layer by layer, like the legal plans we used to prepare for cases, with no mercy and high stakes. He connected me with a clerk who worked for the regular court. By 3 a.m., I had sent the request through a safe way. Frances, my lawyer, had already written it. We asked for a temporary order to stop Michael and Rachel from bothering me, saying it was elder abuse, forcing me to do things with money and bad living conditions. We included a request to freeze their money, saying there was a danger of them taking my money right away. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't lie down. I sat on the edge of my cot, my robe pulled tight, my eyes fixed on the shadows dancing across the garage wall. At 7:13 a.m., my phone buzzed. Order granted. Emergency order approved. Will be carried out within 12 hours. 12 hours. That was all I needed. By 9 a.m., Frances had already contacted a court-appointed officer and local police. My name was removed from dependent status in any medical report Michael had sent. A financial expert was assigned to check the money activities in my accounts. At noon, while Rachel scrolled on her phone and Michael made coffee, I walked out of the garage and into the kitchen, holding a sealed envelope. Michael turned. Mom, you okay? I set the envelope on the table, slid it across the surface with 2 fingers, and said, effective immediately, you are both not allowed to contact, talk to, or manage any money aspects of my property. He laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then Frances walked in behind me, followed by an officer with a clipboard and a badge. Michael Harper, the officer said, you've been given legal papers. Rachel dropped her mug. It shattered. What is this? She cried. Restraining order, Frances answered. And notice of a money investigation. Michael looked pale. You can't be serious. I met his eyes. You put me in a garage to die. You laughed about it. You planned to take everything while pretending it was care. He started to speak, but the officer raised a hand. You are told not to speak further. This is now a legal matter. And just like that, the house I helped pay for was no longer theirs to control. The woman they tried to bury had returned, carrying proof, protected by the very system I once served, and this time the judge's hammer was in my hand. On the morning of the third day, I did not shake. I had not slept much the night before, not from fear, but from a readiness so sharp it kept me awake, like I was back at the courthouse steps at 6:45 a.m., reviewing case files in the cold winter wind with a black coffee in hand. The kind of readiness that comes not from anger, but from clear thinking. Cold, legal, step-by-step clear thinking. I put on my best coat, dark navy wool, the one Charles had given me the Christmas before he passed. I brushed my hair, put some color on my cheeks, and tucked the thick yellow envelope under my arm like it was a loaf of bread. I did not knock when I entered the kitchen. Michael was at the counter, stirring milk into his cereal, without a shirt, humming like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Rachel stood near the sink in her robe, looking at her phone with a slight smile on her lips. I walked to the center of the room and placed the envelope on the table. I did it carefully, quietly. I took a step back and folded my hands. Michael turned, annoyed. "What's that?" he asked. I didn't speak. He rolled his eyes and grabbed it, tearing it open with one hand like it was junk mail. Then he froze. His eyes scanned the top, the court stamp, the black writing, notice of legal complaint filed, elder abuse, financial coercion, and neglect. Plaintiff, Eleanor May Harper. Defendant, Michael Stephen Harper. Rachel looked up. Her fingers stopped mid-screen. "What is this?" she asked sharply. Michael gave a bitter laugh. "You filed a lawsuit against your own son." "I filed a truth," I said calmly. "You made the garage my home. You made your own goals more important than my well-being. And now I've made the law my witness." He slammed the paper down. "You can't be serious." "I am," I said. "And so is the judge who signed the order." "This is trash," he snapped. "It won't work." Rachel grabbed the papers. Her eyes grew wide. "Michael, there's an emergency order in here. A 30-day restraining order. Effective immediately," I said. He turned to me, his voice getting louder. "You are my mother." "And you are my plaintiff," I replied. He crumpled the document in his hand, his fists shaking. "You think this scares me? You think I'll let you do this? I'll call the lawyer." At that moment, the doorbell rang. None of us moved. Then the knock came hard, 3 times. I stayed where I was as Michael stomped to the door and pulled it open. 2 officers stood on the porch, one holding a clipboard. "Michael Harper," the taller one asked. Michael's voice cracked. "Yeah. You've been given a protective order filed through the Court of Common Pleas, approved by Judge Benton and filed under Emergency Law 57E. We are here to make sure the 30-day no-contact order is followed and to begin checking all your money for a temporary freeze while we investigate." Rachel gasped. I stood still, hands folded. Michael's defiance began to shake in his shoulders. "This is crazy. She's old. She's confused. She doesn't even know what she's doing." I stepped forward. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I gave you 30 years of sacrifice. I gave you a future, and you gave me a garage and a plan to steal what little I had left." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Rachel backed into the hallway, looking pale. The officer handed Michael a packet. "You have 1 hour to pack. You will stay at a different home. Any contact, physical or digital, will break the court order and may result in arrest." "I'm her son," he mumbled. "You were," I said, "but today you're just another man who did not realize how strong a woman who remembers everything can be." He didn't speak again. They left in under an hour. The garage sat empty by nightfall, and I, wrapped in the same coat Charles gave me, finally sat at the kitchen table in the chair they once said I wasn't welcome in, and opened the window to let the cold air in. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. By the end of that week, my story had left the garage and entered the public world. It started with a local reporter, a kind-spoken woman named Terry, whom I'd known in passing from the courthouse years ago. She called Frances after hearing whispers about a protective order being given out in under 12 hours and a son being removed from his own home by his mother, a retired court clerk. Terry asked if I would talk. I said yes. We met at Frances's office, where I told my story with the same clear way I had used reading court papers for decades. No tears, no drama, just the facts, the recordings, the dates, the blanket, the blood I coughed into my sleeve, the birthday party behind a wall, the laughter that followed their plan. The article appeared in the local paper 2 days later with a headline that made my heart stop. Mother sleeps in garage, takes son to court, and wins. The smaller heading read, Retired clerk files elder abuse charges after being forced into freezing conditions. Evidence includes hidden recordings and court testimony from a retired judge. My photo, taken outside the courthouse, showed me in my navy coat, eyes sharp, face calm. The image spread quickly. By Friday, newspapers in the region picked it up. A Sunday morning TV show asked to interview me live. I said no to the national news, but only because I had more important invitations. The Central Pennsylvania Women's Alliance reached out first. We'd be honored to have you as a special guest at our spring meeting, the organizer said. You've given so many women strength. Then the Harrisburg Senior Council, then a legal discussion, then the State Bar Association. Apparently, I'd become something of a local hero, the grandmother who took back her chair at the kitchen table. But what touched me most wasn't the titles or panels. It was the handwritten letters. They came by the dozens. One from a woman in Pittsburgh who had spent 6 months sleeping in her basement while her son's wife told people she was traveling. One from a woman in Ohio who thanked me for reminding her that being quiet doesn't mean being helpless. I sat at my desk each evening replying to as many as I could. It became a daily habit: tea, music, and writing back to the women who, like me, had waited too long to speak. Meanwhile, back in Harrisburg, things fell apart for Michael and Rachel faster than even Frances thought. The church they went to held a private meeting after reading the local news and getting many worried calls. Michael, once the head of their community board, was quietly removed from his leadership position. He broke the moral trust we expect of our leaders, their pastor later told me. But the real hit came the following week. An investigator from the state's Department of Aging started a full review of my case, including the recordings I sent. As part of the investigation, Rachel's ability to be a parent was checked, especially after the quote she gave during that recorded talk. The garage is the only place she can die and not inconvenience anyone. That line appeared in nearly every news story. She argued it was taken out of context, but context didn't save her. The court temporarily stopped her rights to care for her daughter, my granddaughter. The child was placed with Rachel's sister, waiting for more checks. Rachel's screams filled the courthouse hallway that morning. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. Frances called me after and simply said, "It's done. She's out." There was no joy in seeing a mother lose her child, but there was justice in seeing a woman held responsible for thinking another woman's life was worth nothing. Later that month, I was asked to speak at a workshop called Power in Quiet Resistance. I stood at the podium facing an audience of women, some young, some with gray hair, all leaning forward like every word mattered. I began. I am not loud. I was never the loud one. I took notes. I scheduled hearings. I organized the truth into neat folders and handed it to men who got the praise. But I never forgot how to speak. I just waited for when it mattered. They put me in a garage and called it generosity. But I recorded their cruelty and I gave it to justice. Not for revenge, but because someday another woman might be in a garage with no coat, and I want her to know she is not alone. The crowd stood up. I did not smile widely. I just bowed my head, thankful, steady, and when I returned home that night to the small apartment Angela helped me rent, I looked around at the simple walls, the working heater, the soft chair near the window. No fancy fabric, no stone counters, no glitter, just peace and power. The kind that does not yell, the kind that never forgets. I now live in a second-floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood near Mechanicsburg, just 20 minutes from the courthouse I once worked at, and a world away from the garage I was left to freeze in. It is not grand, just 2 rooms, a small kitchen, a cozy chair by the window, but it is mine, and I did not find it alone. Angela, my granddaughter's daughter, my strongest link to hope, found this place for me. She was the one who drove me here the day after the protective order was in place. She brought my suitcase, unpacked my clothes, arranged my few special items on the bookshelf. She made my tea before I asked. She was the one who called me Grandma again without thinking, as if my title had never been damaged. "You're safe now," she told me, and for the first time in months, I believed her. Angela comes by 3 nights a week after her nursing shifts. We make soup, we play dominoes, and sometimes we sit in silence. I love that silence. It does not hurt. It heals. After the news storm quieted, I was asked to speak again. This time, not at a women's meeting or a legal discussion, but on national television. A Sunday morning news show called Voices of the Forgotten wanted to feature my case as part of a series on elder abuse and family betrayal. At first, I said no. I had said enough. I had won. What more was there to prove? But then Angela looked at me and said, "Grandma, someone out there is still sleeping in a garage. Someone who doesn't have a lawyer or a judge or a recording, but maybe they'll hear you." So I said, yes. The set was clean and bright, the lights hot, the TV host, polished and charming, held my hand during the sound check. I wore my best navy blue blouse, my hair pinned back. The microphone clipped to my collar felt heavy, but I sat tall. When they started recording, I began like this. "I am not here to cry. I already did that. I am here to remember, because memory, when kept safe, becomes proof." I told them the whole story, the stroke, the garage, the whisper behind the wall. I spoke slowly, not because I was old, but because I wanted every word to land clearly. Then I paused, and I said, "I do not hate my son. I miss who he used to be, but I do not want him punished. I want people like him stopped." The segment aired 2 days later. The station received over 4,000 emails. Some offered help. Some offered money to elder abuse shelters. Some simply said, "I believe you, and now I believe myself." After that, I began helping the Pennsylvania Elder Support Network, giving advice on cases where others, mostly women, were unsure if what they were going through was enough to speak up about. And I told them this: if you have to ask whether something is abuse, it probably is. I do not think of myself as a fighter. I do not like fighting. But I do believe in protecting myself, in drawing a line, in saying, "Not this time." Because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is not scream, but endure, remember, and finally tell. The house is still there, sitting quietly on a tree-lined street in Harrisburg, the one with the blue shutters and the crooked mailbox I always meant to fix. But now it is no longer their fortress, no longer the place of my shame. It is mine again. After the investigation finished, and the courts decided in my favor, I got back full legal ownership of the property. Michael and Rachel argued for a short time, but the judge reviewed the original transfer papers, the ones they had tried to change, and said they were invalid because of force and cheating. My name was put back, their names erased. I did not move back in. Instead, I put the house up for rent, not to strangers, but to a young couple with an older parent who uses a wheelchair. I met them in person. I saw the way they pushed their mother's wheelchair up the ramp. I heard how gently they spoke to her, how they asked about her comfort before their own. I knew they were the right people to rent to. Every dollar of rent goes into a fund I created, Justice in Silence. It is not a large group yet, but its goal is simple: to give emergency legal and emotional help for older people who are quietly being mistreated by their own families. Not the kind of mistreatment that leaves bruises, the kind that leaves someone sleeping in a garage with no one to notice. I work with lawyers, social workers, and volunteers. We take calls. We offer advice. We listen to stories that sound like mine. And we tell those women, those men, you are not alone, and no, you are not crazy. To start the foundation, we recorded a short video. They brought a camera crew to my apartment, set up a single light, a microphone, and asked me to speak freely. I looked straight into the camera and said, they thought I was just a little old woman who didn't understand what was happening. But I do. I understand agreements. I understand quiet. I understand the law because I wrote it, filed it, made sure it was followed for 47 years. They thought they could leave me in a garage, but I turned that cold into proof. I used to be a mother who cooked dinner and folded laundry. Now I am a woman who gives consequences. Fairness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it watches. And when the time is right, it stands up. The video now plays on our foundation's main page. It has been watched over 500,000 times. I still live simply. My days are quiet. But now, when I sit by the window with my tea and hear the laughter from the street below, I smile. Because this isn't the story of how I was treated badly. It is the story of how I remembered who I was and became the judge of my own ending. After everything, after the orders, the interviews, the starting of the foundation, I began writing letters. Not to lawyers, not to reporters. To them. To Michael, to Rachel, and most of all to my granddaughter. I knew it might not change anything. I didn't write out of tender feelings. I wrote because there were things that needed to be said, clearly, calmly, for good. The letter to Michael was 3 pages long, typed, signed, sent by special mail. I started it simply, you stopped calling me Mom long before the garage. I reminded him of the summer I worked extra hours to buy his first suit for debate club, of how I learned to drive again at age 60 just to take him to his college interviews when his father was in the hospital. I reminded him that I never once asked him to pay me back, only for respect. Then I wrote, when you placed me in the garage, you did not just fail as a son. You failed as a man trusted with memory. You forgot who held your sick body through nights of crying and despair, and that forgetting, more than the cruelty, is what harmed you. I ended the letter without hate, but without forgiveness. You may fix your life, but not through my quietness. You lost the right to that. The letter to Rachel was shorter. You laughed about where I might die. I hope you remember that sound every time your daughter asks where her grandmother went. No more, no less. The hardest letter to write was to my granddaughter. She was only 12 when it happened, young enough to be protected, old enough to notice things not said. She had slipped a folded card under the garage door the second night. I still have it. I'm sorry if I was mean. I love you, Maddie. I did not answer then, but now from my little desk by the window, I wrote, Maddie, you did nothing wrong. The quietness between us was not your fault. Sometimes adults hide their shame by calling it protection, but you are old enough to know that loving someone means asking questions, and I hope one day when you are ready, you'll ask me everything. I will tell you the truth, and I will never make you feel small for looking for it. I signed it simply, with love, always and strongly, Grandma. I mailed it. I do not know if it will be answered, but I needed her to know I had not disappeared. I had taken back my name, my space, my story, and most of all, my voice. That is what fairness in quietness is really about. Not punishment, but being present. Not revenge, but making truth real again. Page by page, word by word, until even the women in garages are remembered by name. And no one ever dares to forget us again. If you've made it to the end of this story, perhaps it's because something inside you recognized the cold. Not the cold of a garage in Pennsylvania, but the cold of being ignored, underestimated, or quietly erased. Maybe you felt the pain of being called a burden or heard someone whisper behind closed doors that you've had your time, as if respect came with a time limit. Maybe, like me, you were told to be thankful for small bits while they ate at the table you once paid for. Maybe you were told that your pain was too much, that your memories were wrong, that your truth was inconvenient. If so, know this, you are not alone. Here, we make space for women who endured, who kept the proof while everyone else forgot what was owed. We speak for the mothers, the grandmothers, the widows, and workers who gave everything and asked for almost nothing, only to be told one day that they were in the way. But we don't stay silent anymore. We don't yell to be heard. We speak with the weight of years, of memory, of fairness delayed for a long time. Because our stories aren't made up. They're the missing parts behind every family picture that looked too perfect. They're the notes no one wanted to publish. And now, finally, they're being told. If this story moved you, if it made you feel strong or made you silently say me too, then I ask you to stay with us. Because when you do, you're not just clicking a button. You're sending a message to the world and to every older woman who was ever pushed aside that we are still here, that we are still watching, that we are still telling the truth. And that truth, it may come late, it may come quietly, but it never comes empty.